world in the 1930s? Okay, anyone give a shout out on that?
Dust Bowl.
Dust Bowl's one, definitely. That's a big one. What's another event? But anyways, well, technically it started in the 19... What?
Is it the Depression?
The Depression, yes. As you mentioned, the Dust Bowl is a big thing. It made, made a lot of stuff in the Depression even worse. But yeah, 1930s, it is a complicated time. This is still, people want to adhere, hold on to tradition. Where is the place of woman? Is it the home? Where her place in the home is, where her place in the family is. However, there have been changes. There has been the passage of the 19th Amendment. Women have gained the right of voting at the federal and, at the state level. So this changed outcome. Women now have a voice and can go out there and vote for whom they please. And of course, as it mentioned, the Great Depression, these are factors which are going to make, change the role of women in American society, even if it doesn't change always their perception, or at least the society's perception of them. Any questions so far? All right, move on to the next slide. Yeah. So, as you say, the traditional role, of, where people are in the house is that, men are traditionally the head of the house. They're the ones accustomed to being what's called the breadwinner. Does anyone ever know what the term breadwinner means? Anyone got an idea? No ideas?
Is that similar to bringing home the bacon?
Yes. Basically, it means you're the primary financial, you bring in the primary financial goods and stabilities to family. That it's your job to make sure that, all the, all that income comes in is what is necessary to your family. Can you move the slide down one, sir? Yeah. So basically, when men are out of work, they definitely feel like failures. The point is, many of them hid the fact that they lost their jobs. They'd get up in the morning, get dressed, put on their outfits and head out to work. If they owned a car, they drove it until they couldn't afford the gas. Or they went out either to find jobs or went out to drink their troubles away. Not exactly the smartest option. This is where women in society, at least starting at the family level, begin to change. Initially, they're pretty much, their roles manager of the household. In many cases, becomes a bit more than simply just, okay, looking out for the kids till they're at school and fixing up meals. They begin to actually manage the economics of the house. They take a look at, hey, what money comes in? I tend to buy all the groceries. Okay, what can I do to make this last? Basically, majority of women were far better at dealing with the stress of the changes that came out of the Great Depression than most men. Now, you might say their minds are definitely more flexible. Basically, they assume the title of head of house in all but name alone. Technically, according to society, man is in charge, but reality, the wife is the one, running the ship. The husband might be the man, the captain of the house. She becomes the admiral. As you might say, the power behind the scene. So they got to come up with unique ways to change things, to make sure that their families survive in the wake of this massive amount of economic fallout. So basically, they began to learn how to do stuff with less. For instance, during the time over our first pandemic shutdown, how many people did a lot of canning or a lot of crafts people began to do? I'll work and fix all that stuff in the home on my own, or make sure that garden looks really nice. This is similar to what was done then. You know, you really couldn't go out to shop. You didn't have the money for it. You had to really, truly grow your own vegetables, or whatever vegetables you got, you canned, you stored, you found a way to make it stretch and last. You know, they're looking for every opportunity to save. You know, they bought yesterday's bread. Remember, this is back in time before our big old supermarket and a lot of preserves that we put in food. People usually bought bread just about every day. And bread that wasn't fresh, initially was gotten rid of. You know, you fed it to the birds or you did something else. This is when people started doing, hey, I'll find a use of that second day old bread. Welcome to the advent of croutons. Then you've got, you know, using old fabric. You know, trying to make the fabric they have last, you know, making children's clothes last, cutting things down, you know, making the clothes, you know, kids' clothes out of the adult clothes, finding a way to make everything stretch to make sure every dollar they had would go as far as necessary to keep their family's head above water. Maybe you think this is always successful? No, not always. I can tell you for an absolute fact that some people, you know, literally lost fortunes on this because people just didn't know what to do. Members of my family back in the start of the 1920s were people who hung out, who, you know, lived not too far from where a house called the Breakers is in Long Island, you know, one of the residences for the Vanderbilts. But it was the 1920s that literally destroyed everything. You know, the end of the 20s going into the 30s, you know, everything went away. Just, yeah, when people are unable to cope and adapt, things just roll you over. Okay, now we have for work that women did. And technically, if you think about it, women have always worked. The question is, were they getting paid for it? Or paid properly for it? So there have been traditional roles for women outside of the house, and that is as maids, as cooks. That's considered what was woman's work from way back in the day. However, this is the time period where they begin to see more actual professional work, working in the textiles industry, you know, as clerks, or as the concept of the professional secretary. This is the time, this is, you know, before the 1930s, if you were a secretary in a major office, let's say in New York or Chicago, you were probably a man, not a woman. It's really only out of the 1930s that the idea that a woman's role in the business is as a secretary. This is where they begin to make that break into, you know, into business. They become professional secretaries, the personal secretary for someone running a business. Now, this created a lot of resentment in the work field. You know, many people saw that these positions were something that was traditionally held by men and should be only held by men. But as things progress, you know, people realize, hey, I can hire her. But then again, what's one of the reasons why a lot of companies might have hired women? Is everyone here familiar with the concept of the wage gap?
Yes.
Yep. Traditionally, and you know, even unfortunately, even in today's society, a lot of times some companies or some business owners try to get away with paying women less than men, even though they're doing the same job, probably even better. But at this time period, they say, oh, we can pay women less, because the idea is women already have a husband and there's always someone else bringing money, so they need to get paid as much money. That question, does everyone get married?
No.
No.
No, everyone doesn't. In fact, commonly noted among some historians is this is the 1930s becomes what's known as the golden age of the spinster. Now, women not pursuing either they weren't pursuing, you know, a husband, or people whose husbands had just left. You know, they were so ashamed of their jobs and everything, they literally left their families behind. Usually they went out, you know, either left, started somewhere new, committed suicide. I mean, people were jumping out of windows at this time because they were that depressed. This basically was a time when America became truly very much self-reliant. And also, some of the roles and laws that were passed limited what could be made. The 1932 Federal Economy Act, banned more than one family member working from the government. Why would you think a law like that exists? Aside from, we might say, what's the inherent thing of limiting the number of working women, what's another reason why the government might do that? Anyone just want to throw something out there?
Save money.
Money, yep. Very much so. How much the money gives someone, and also how often do you hear about someone working in the government getting fired?
Never really.
Yeah, pretty much. If you get a job in the government, you can pretty much keep that sucker for 20 plus years. The government's really not known for really firing people unless you massively, massively screw up. They have find something else for you to do. But getting a job in the government is pretty stable when it comes to employment in the United States. And a lot of people are looking for some form of government job, especially with the advent of the New Deal after the first 100 days in Congress, when FDR was, just coming up with programs trying to get them out there for the economy. Some that did very well, some that did not do very well. But yeah, these are some laws people came up because they thought they were helping women. A lot of people believe that, women going out into the workforce, and aiding the family was, that was wrong. We have to make sure that laws protect them so they don't have to do that. Would that kind of thinking fly today? No, probably not. A lot of lawsuits have come out of that one. All right, so as the slide says, some numbers for consideration. In 1930, about 11 million women were employed. By 1940, 13 million women were employed. Now, that's not a large, it doesn't seem like a large number, but considering, if you consider the time period and the concept of where, and the mentality of where a woman was supposed to be, that actually is a large number in comparison. It's not what I would truly have loved to see, far more women in the workforce. That'd have been greater, but that number against a very patriarchal view of society, that's actually a pretty good increase. And 75% of professional women were nurses and school teachers. This tended to be the acceptable professional job. In 1932, 2% of American lawyers and judges were actually women. And in 1930, there were almost no female engineers in the United States. That's the United States. Actually, a lot of times when women were looking for an engineering career, they had to pursue education outside of the US's borders. And of course, as I mentioned before, women were paid less. The minimum wage is significantly lower than it was for men. Sorry, getting close to the screen so I can read it. Apologies. So basically, they're getting paid literally half of what men are getting paid, even though they're doing the same job, working the same hours. And in many cases, this is a factor for people actually hiring that 3 million other women. Hey, I don't have to pay them as much, or I should say, they're supposed to pay them as much, but they could get away with not paying them as much. And also Social Security benefits, which really came to be in the 1930s as part of the New Deal, were designed to go to men and their dependent wife. Now, a wife was considered a dependent, not an equal in the eyes of the administration. Basically, they only had economic rights in relation to their husbands. Legal realities. Yeah. This is one I've always, liked and disliked reading. One, it's interesting for history. And the dislike of it is, wow, people are really, small-minded. Up until the 1960s, just to let you know, most retail stores in America would not issue an independent credit card to a married woman. You actually had to have, you know, you were applying a credit card at the stores that were popular at the time, Macy's, Montgomery Ward, Gimbel's. You actually had to have your husband there. Or divorced or single women often found it difficult to produce credit, to purchase a home, a car. People do live. In most healthy populations, women tend to outnumber men. Not everyone is going to get married. But the mentality was, women were going to get married. They're going to have a significant other in their life. And, it was the man's job as breadwinner to do all this. Women who were, hey, I'm not going to get married. I'm going to pursue a career on my own. They were fighting a massive uphill battle. Laws concerned with welfare, crime, prostitution, and abortion. These are biased against women. And many times this is still a mentality to this day. That, certain crimes are done. They're not, this is, what is done to women varies in difference from men, or in the terms, let's say, prostitution. In most people's mindset, those who engage in the oldest profession is solely women. Well, no, men engage in this too. Sex discrimination, in the definition of crimes existed. For instance, a woman who shot and killed her husband would be, convicted of homicide. However, if a man shoots a woman, a husband shoots his wife, it's a crime of passion, or, a moment of insanity. It's so forgiving on the part of the men. And also during the Great Depression, 26 of the states passed laws prohibiting hired married women. Once again, that mentality, a woman's place was supposed to be in the house, with the family, making sure the kids are getting ready for school, making sure that meals are ready for everyone. That's where women should be. We need to pass these laws to protect women. Such a wonderful concept of protection. Yes, once again, the pursuit of education, in a word, limited. Now, a lot of women did attend college, but a lot of collegiate attendance came for a lot of women was in, only a few forms. These were actually what are called finishing schools. You got a slightly better education than you would in high school, but these also taught you all domestic skills of running a household. Basically, so when you got married, you knew what to do. Household management, how to go about cooking, how to do all these things. So if you hadn't learned this at home from your own mother. Or another reason women went to college was not to education, but to find a husband. Has anyone here ever heard of an MRS degree?
No.
Well, this is a common thing, and I even encountered this, when I first went through college back in the 90s. This is a comment from some people. It said, MRS meaning miss someone. How women change that first. It's either MS if you're unmarried, but MRS if you're married. So
This
people,
was the
when
joke.
we're going to college.
Mr. Ryan, this was the joke at the old Miami University that I went to, that, guys would go off and get their business degree at the Richard T. Farmer School of Business. And meanwhile, all of the elementary ed students who were predominantly women would try and date the guys from the Richard T. Farmer School of Business. So that when they went off and made $100K at a Wall Street firm, the elementary ed degree was never used, because the women would just stay at home and take care of kids and whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
And that was still back in the late 90s, early 2000s when I was in school. But the joke really wasn't a joke. It was a reality for many of the people there.
Yeah. And it definitely was a reality at that time too. They're looking for someone who's going to have, it's very much true that usually possession of a college degree, it doesn't always guarantee, but it definitely helps out in getting a higher paid position in society, more financial security, financial stability. And, hey, for women who are looking to marry someone, you're going to marry someone who's got a chance at, success in life, or someone who doesn't. So basically, those who didn't want to fit that traditional role of, housewife, didn't want that shit. They want to actually do other stuff, those who want to pursue degrees in, the study of history, law, medical science, they were all at the most disadvantaged. Not as disadvantaged as they'd been, say, at the, the turn of the 20th century, but there was still a lot of, cultural and, backwardsly philosophical mental blocks in people's minds about women in society. Now, I personally love the title of this particular slide. This I got from one of my old history and sociology teachers. Her name was Miss Addison. She would wear this button anytime there was an election. A woman's place is in the House and the Senate. I've always gotten a kick out of that. All right. Now, yes, we had actually gained the national federal vote. Now, we had the passage of the 19th, we had the passage of the amendments. We have gained the right to vote. Now, could women vote before that? Well, yeah, remember, voting, how you vote is actually first primarily determined by the state, not the federal government, especially when it comes to federal election, which is why in 1917 we had the first female member of Congress. Jeanette Radkin. She was one of the Congress people in Congress at the time who actually voted against America getting involved in World War I. She was a devout pacifist. She commonly said, "I cannot fight in a war, so I will not, send anyone else to fight in the war." But she was elected because, her state had actually passed women's suffrage long before the rest of the U.S. did via, the amendments process. So she was there. Funny enough, when she was reelected to Congress, was during the Second World War, and she was actually at that point the only person who voted not to declare war on Japan. Because once again, as a devout pacifist, she couldn't fight, therefore she wasn't going to send anyone else out to fight. But we did have another person come to Congress. Florence Pegg, was the first Jewish and thus the first non-Christian woman in Congress. Now, there had been others who were not followers of Judeo-Christianity, which is, at this time, and still to a degree, the largest religious practice in this country. But she's the first woman to hold that position. But that's just 2. How many seats in Congress? Ms. Van Gasbeck, want to remind our students how many seats Congress has?
435 in the House, 100 in the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
Which would have been
So out of
smaller back
500
then, but
yeah, out of over 500 seats, only 2 being held by women. I mean, shoot, when was the first female Supreme Court justice appointed?
1986.
And the name, sir?
Sandra Day O'Connor.
Yep. Sandra Day O'Connor, appointed by President Ronald Reagan to the Supreme Court. First woman to be supported to the first woman to be put on the court. Now, have we had a few other Supreme Court justices since then who are women? Yes, thank heaven.
And as
But
of
yeah,
as of January 20th, we will have our first female vice president.
Yes, we'll have our first female vice president. And quite possibly in another 4 years' time, our possibly first female president.
Well, it depends on how Joe Biden does as the president. Depends on his health, too.
I was thinking more along the lines of his health as opposed to other qualifications. Because, I mean, he's what, 60-something? He's 70-something?
Joe Biden, he's 78.
Yep.
He just turned 78 the other day. And he broke his foot yesterday playing with his dog, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need age limits.
That's ageist.
All right,
Mr.
so yeah,
Ryan.
basically 1930s politics.
That's ageist, Mr. Ryan.
I don't know, when I get to be that age, I don't want to have that level of stress in my life. Heck, I wouldn't want it now.
Mr. Ryan, we're going to have to wrap it up so I can get the kids to their next session
Gotcha.
here.
As I said, 1930s politics is still largely a man's world. However, FDR does change a lot of this. You know, he and his, his wife Eleanor was an activist. She was, with, supported Roosevelt through a lot of his programs that he would establish. And for some reason, all the people I wanted to put in here didn't show up. I'll have to try to find and get this way, but it's a list of people that FDR had appointed. He appointed the first female, secretaries, part of the actual cabinet. No other president had done that before him. And these are the people who would go and, come up with the ideas and try to really get the concepts of the New Deal out there. The Workforce Act, the Tennessee Valley Authority, the original NRA, not the National Rifle Association, but the National, what was it? National Recruiting Association, the Work Recruiting Association.
Are you talking about the Works Progress Administration?
Yeah, that. Okay, yeah, that one. Sorry, I get all those acronyms mixed up.
Yes, it's the alphabet soup.
Yeah, good Lord, it was the 100 Days of Alphabet Soup. Truly, that was a lot of the programs that he set up were being run, either at the absolute top by a female secretary of that office, or the people underneath this other secretary were primarily women. Women would be one of the driving forces in the New Deal.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ryan. I appreciate you guiding us through and introducing the 1930s here. Your assignment, folks, over the next few days is posted already. It's the story of the Great Depression as told by Dorothea Lange. Dorothea Lange was a photographer. She went out during the Dust Bowl time period from 1933 to 1936 and took pictures of what were known as Okies. They were displaced farmers from places like Oklahoma. That's where they get their terminology from. And while people like John Steinbeck would write massively successful stories, such as The Grapes of Wrath or Of Mice and Men, about these same people, Dorothea Lange literally, took pictures of these people and told the story. You've heard a picture is worth 1,000 words. Okay. This was kind of the whole point that, these people were allowed or, told, their story was told by Dorothea Lange. So Dorothea Lange took these photos, and I gave you the first one because it's their most iconic image. It's this one called Migrant Mother. Okay. And it's, this woman right here, she has 3 kids in this photo, the 2 that you see right here and the baby. A lot of people kind of overlook the fact that she's holding on to a baby. This was considered to be the most iconic image from the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression. If you look up, Dust Bowl images, this is usually the first one that comes up, but she has a multitude of other photos. So what I'm going to have you guys do is I'm going to have you look at these resources that I compiled together. These are galleries and then basic biographies about Dorothea Lange and what her purpose was. I'm going to ask you to make your own 1-paragraph biography of Dorothea Lange. Do not copy and paste. I need you to write it yourself. So basically read through some of these links. You can also Google search her on your own, but give me a basic synopsis here in your own hand. Give me a paragraph of who she is and what her goals were. And then what I'm going to ask you to do is come up with 4 other pictures. All right, 4 other pictures, 5 total. And you're going to answer the question of what do you observe? So tell me kind of what you see in the pictures that you post, but also what is Lange trying to tell us from the photo? What story is she trying to get across through her photographic skills? So again, and I gave you a link here, Dorothea Lange images on Google, that'll take you through there. But this first one, the Great Depression photos on WordPress, not only gives you the photos, but the title of each photo in a pretty easy gallery. So the first and last links on this resources page will get you the actual photos. The 2 links in between here are really going to help you with the Dorothea Lange biography. And that is due by next Monday. So for the rest of the week, you're going to kind of be taking what Mr. Ryan has talked about here about women's place. He talked about women's place in the home, and you're going to apply that to now. Well, what happens if you don't have a home? What happens if you're displaced? What role are women going to take in that? So you're kind of looking at the overall society of the Great Depression, especially out in the Dust Bowl region, through the lens of Dorothea Lange. All right, folks, if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, you can certainly stay back. You can email at any point and ask, but I'm going to get you out of here so you can get to your next class. Thanks for coming in. Tomorrow, obviously, we're going back to the normal remote learning schedule where you don't have to come in for live sessions. We will schedule some time. I'm going to be honest with you folks, unless they require me to do something like this, I'm probably not going to set up class sessions like this, merely because you guys are busy. A lot of you work. I had at least 4 of you kind of email me and say, hey, I may not be there because of work schedules or because of family obligations. Like I said, some people had doctor's appointments. So a lot of this is going to be through video, recording this kind of stuff. So again, if you have any specific questions, I'll try and put out some office hours so that you can come in and ask questions. But other than that, you're really only about 3 or 4 mini projects away from being done with the coursework anyway for this elective. I appreciate you coming in. Again, I have you down as being here. You'll get some extra credit for coming in. If you have any questions, hang back. Otherwise, you are off to your next class. Thanks, folks. And thank you, Mr. Ryan. I appreciate it.
Oh, not a problem. Any other classes you want me to do a reading over or no?
Not necessarily, just because I got to go to Ficker and I share that third bell, and
I gotcha.
I'm not even teaching in that. Like I've been joking all day that you and Emily, Ficker's student teacher, are basically doing my job. All I am is the gatekeeper of